Granny Cornwall's Storytime, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Chapter 2, Part 2, On the Open Road. The rat saw what was passing in his mind and wavered. He hated disappointing people, and he was fond of the mole and would do almost anything to oblige him. Toad was watching both of them closely. Have some lunch, she said diplomatically, and we'll talk it over. We needn't decide anything in a hurry. Of course, I don't really care. I only want to give pleasure to you fellows. Live for others. That's my motto in life. During lunch, which was excellent, of course, as everything at Toad Hall always was, the toad simply let himself go. Disregarding the rat, he proceeded to play upon the inexperienced mole as on a harp. Naturally a talkative animal, and always mastered by his imagination, he painted the prospects of the trip and the joys of the open life and the roadside in such glowing colours that the mole could hardly sit in his chair for excitement. Somehow it soon seemed taken for granted by all three of them that the trip was a settled thing, and the rat, though still unconvinced in his mind, allowed his good nature to override his personal objections. He could not bear to disappoint his two friends, who were already deep in schemes and anticipations, planning out each day's separate occupation for several weeks ahead. When they were quite ready, the now triumphant Toad led his companions to the paddock and set them to capture the old grey horse, who, without having been consulted, and to his own extreme annoyance, had been ordered by Toad to do the dustiest job in this dusty expedition. He frankly preferred the paddock and took a great deal of catching. Meantime, Toad packed the lockers still tighter with necessaries and hung noose bags, nets of onions, bundles of hay and baskets on the bottom of the cart. At last the horse was caught and harnessed, and they set off, all talking at once, each animal trudging either by the side of the cart or sitting on the shaft as the humour took him. It was a golden afternoon. The smell of the dust they kicked up was rich and satisfying. Out of thick orchards on either side of the road, birds called and whistled to them cheerily. Good-natured wayfarers passed them by, giving them a good day, and stopped to say nice things about their beautiful cart. And rabbits sitting at their front doors in the hedgerows held up their forepaws and said, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." Late in the evening, tired and happy and miles from home, they drew up on a remote common, far from habitations, turned the horse loose to graze, and ate their simple supper sitting on the grass by the side of the cart. Toad talked bigger about all he was going to do in the days to come, while the stars grew fuller and larger all around them, and a yellow moon, peering suddenly and silently from nowhere in particular, came to keep them company and listen to their talk. At last they turned into their little bunks in the cart, and Toad, kicking out his legs sleepily, said, "Well, good night, you fellows. This is the real life for a gentleman. Talk about your old river." "I don't talk about my old river," replied the patient rat. "You know I don't, Toad. But I think about it," he added pathetically in a lower tone. "I think about it all the time." The mole reached out from under his blanket, felt for Rat's paw in the darkness and gave it a squeeze. "I'll do whatever you like, Ratty," he whispered. "Shall we run away tomorrow morning? Quite early, very early, and go back to our dear old hole on the river?" No, we'll see it out," whispered back the rat. "Thanks awfully, but I ought to stick by Toad till this trip is ended. It wouldn't be safe for him to be left by himself. It won't take long. His fads never do. Good night." The end was indeed nearer than even a rat suspected. After so much open air and excitement, the toad slept very soundly, and no amount of shaking could rouse him out of bed the next morning. So the mole and rat turned to quietly and manfully, and while the rat sorted the horse and lit a fire and cleaned last night's cups and platters and got things ready for breakfast, the mole trudged off to the nearest village, a long way off, for milk and eggs and various necessaries the toad had, of course, forgotten to provide. The hard work had all been done, and the two animals were resting, thoroughly exhausted by the time Toad appeared on the scene, fresh and gay, remarking what a pleasant, easy life they were all leading now, after the cares and worries and fatigues of housekeeping at home. They had a pleasant ramble that day over grassy downs and along narrow by-lanes, and camped as before on a common, only this time the two guests took care that Toad should do his fair share of work. In consequence, when the time came for starting next morning, Toad was by no means so rapturous about the simplicity of the primitive life, and indeed attempted to resume his place in his bunk, whence he was hauled by force. Their way lay, as before, across country by narrow lanes, and it was not until the afternoon that they came onto the high road, their first high road. And there disaster, fleet and unforeseen, sprang out on them. Disaster momentous indeed to their expedition, but simply overwhelming in its effect on the after career of Toad. They were strolling along the high road easily, the mole by the horse's head, talking to him, since the horse had complained that he was being frightfully left out of it and nobody considered him in the least. The toad and the water rat were walking behind the cart talking together. At least Toad was talking, and Rat was saying at intervals, "Yes, precisely, and what did you say to him?" and thinking all the time of something very different. When far behind them they heard a faint warning hum, like the drone of a distant bee. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust, the dark centre of energy, advancing on them at incredible speed, while from out of the dust a faint boop boop wailed like an uneasy animal in pain. Hardly regarding it, they turned to resume their conversation, when, in an instant, as it seemed, the peaceful scene was changed, and with a blast of wind and a whirl of sand that made them jump for the nearest ditch, it was on them. The boop boop rang with a brazen shout in their ears. They had a moment's glimpse of an interior of glittering plate glass and rich Morocco leather, and the magnificent motor car, immense, breath-snatching, passionate, with its driver tense and hugging his wheel, possessed all earth and air for the fraction of a second, flung an enveloping cloud of dust that blinded and enwrapped them utterly, and then dwindled to a speck in the far distance, changed back into a droning bee once more. The old grey horse, dreaming as he plodded along of his quiet paddock in a new raw situation such as this, simply abandoned himself to his natural emotions, rearing, plunging, backing steadily, in spite of all the mole's efforts at his head and all the mole's lively language directed at his better feelings. He drove the cart backwards, the deep ditch at the side of the road. It wavered an instant, then there was a heart-rending crash, and the canary-coloured cart, their pride and joy, lay on its side in the ditch, an irredeemable wreck. The rat danced up and down the road, simply transported with passion. "You villains!" he shouted, shaking both fists. "You scoundrels, you highwaymen, you road hogs! I will have the law of you. I'll report you. I'll take you through all the courts." His homesickness had quite slipped away from him, and for the moment he was the skipper of the canary-coloured vessel, driven on a shoal by the reckless jockeying of rival mariners, and he was trying to recollect all the fine and fighting things he used to say to the masters of steam launches when the wash, as they drove too near the bank, used to flood his parlour carpet at home. Toad sat down in the middle of the dusty road, his legs stretching out before him, and stared fixedly in the direction of the disappearing motor car. He breathed short, his face wore a placid, satisfied expression, and at intervals he fairly murmured, "Poop, poop." The mole was busy trying to quiet the horse, which he succeeded in doing after a time. Then he went to look at the cart on its side in the ditch. It was indeed a sorry sight. Panels and windows smashed, axles hopelessly bent, one wheel off, sardine tins scattered over the wide world, and the bird in the birdcage sobbing pitifully and calling to be let out. The rat came to help him, but their united efforts were not sufficient to right the cart. "Hi, Toad," they called. "Come and bear a hand, can't you?" The toad never answered a word or budged from his seat in the road, so they went to see what was the matter with him. They found him in a sort of a trance, a happy smile on his face, his eyes still fixed on the dusty wake of their destroyer. At intervals he was still heard to murmur, "Poop, poop." The rat shook him by the shoulder. "Are you coming to help us, Toad?" he demanded sternly. "Glorious stirring sight," murmured Toad, never offering to move. "The poetry and motion, the real way to travel, the only way to travel. Here today, in next week, tomorrow. Villages skipped, towns and cities jumped, all is somebody else's horizon. Oh bliss, oh poop, poop, oh my, oh my." "Oh, stop being an ass, Toad," cried the mole despairingly. "And to think I never knew," went on the toad in a dreamy monotone, "all those wasted years that lie behind me. I never knew, never even dreamt. But now that I know, now that I fully realise, oh, what a flowery track lies spread before me henceforth. What dust clouds will spring up behind me as I speed on my reckless way. What carts I will fling carelessly into the ditch in the wake of my magnificent onset. Horrid little carts, common carts, canary-coloured carts." "What do we do with him?" asked Mole, the water rat. "Nothing at all," replied the rat firmly, "because there is nothing to be done. You see, I know him from old, he is now possessed. He has got a new craze, and it always takes him that way in its first stage. He will continue like that for days now, like an animal walking in a happy dream. Quite useless for all practical purposes. Never mind him. Let's go and see what there is to be done about the cart." A careful inspection showed them that even if they succeeded in righting it by themselves, the cart would travel no longer. The axles were in a hopeless state, and the missing wheel was shattered into pieces. The rat knotted the horse's reins over his back and took him by the head, carrying the birdcage and its hysterical occupant in the other hand. "Come on," he said grimly to Mole. "It's 5 or 6 miles to the nearest town, and we'll just have to walk it. The sooner we make a start, the better." "But what about Toad?" asked Mole anxiously as they set off together. "You can't leave him here, sitting in the middle of the road by himself, in that distracted state he's in. It's not safe. Supposing another thing were to come along. Oh, bother Toad, said Rat savagely. I've done with him. They had not proceeded very far on their way, however, when there was a pattering of feet behind them, and Toad caught them up and thrust a paw inside the elbow of each of them, still breathing short and staring into vacancy. Now, look here, Toad, said the Rat sharply. As soon as we get to the town, you'll have to go straight to the police station and see if they know anything about that motor car and who it belongs to, and lodge a complaint against it. And then you'll have to go to a blacksmith's or wheelwright's and arrange for the car to be fetched and mended and put to rights. It'll take time, but it's not quite a hopeless smash. Meanwhile, the Mole and I will go to an inn and find comfortable rooms where we can stay till the cart's ready and till your nerves have recovered their shock. Police station, complaint, murmured Toad dreamily. Me complain of that beautiful, that heavenly vision that was ever vouchsafed me. Mend the cart? I've done with carts forever. I never want to see the cart or hear of it again. Oh, Ratty, you can't think how obliged I am for you consenting to come on this trip. I would have gone without you, and then I would have never seen that swan, that sunbeam, that thunderbolt. I would never have heard that entrancing sound or smelt that bewitching smell. I owe it all to you, my best of friends. The Rat turned away from him in despair. You see what it is, he said to Mole, addressing him across Toad's head. He's quite hopeless. I give up. When we get to the town, we'll go to the railway station, and with luck, we may pick up a train that'll get us back to the riverbank tonight. On reaching the town, they went straight to the station and deposited Toad in the second-class waiting room and gave the porter twopence to keep a strict eye on him. Then they left the horse at an inn stable and gave what directions they could about the cart and its contents. Eventually, a slow train, having landed them at a station not very far from Toad Hall, they escorted the spellbound, sleepwalking Toad to his door, put him inside it, and instructed his housekeeper to feed him, undress him, and put him to bed. Then they got out their boat from the boathouse, sculled down the river home, and at a very late hour sat down to supper in their own cosy riverside parlour, to the Rat's great joy and contentment. The following evening, the Mole, who had risen late and taken things very easy all day, was sitting on the bank fishing, when the Rat, who had been looking up his friends and gossiping, came strolling along to find him. Heard the news, he said. There's nothing else being talked about all along the riverbank. Toad went up to town by early train this morning, and he has ordered a large and very expensive motor car. The end.